And here we go. We are live. So welcome everyone to another edition of My Take on China. And today I'm going to do something that I don't often have to do, but I will always do if I find that it's needed. I'm going to make an apology and a correction. A few months ago, I made a video based on religious freedom. And in it, I said, it's not true that children are banned from church. Well, today, my guest, Mario Cavolo, contacted me and corrected me. Welcome, Mario, and can you please explain what it is that I got wrong and what your experience is so that we can get this right in future?
You bet. Jerry, great to see you again. The last time we had a chance to have a casual gentleman's chat when we visited together face-to-face down in Zhuhai, actually. Jerry, great to see you again. I'm going to lower my volume on my casual. There we go. My volume is down. Good. This is, I don't know. I think I want to start by saying that this is, in one way, this is a hot topic, but it's not a topic to be treated that way. You know, we're talking about political topic, that's for sure. But we're also talking about faith, and we're talking about the church, and I think it needs to be done in a more gentlemanly way, I want to say. And for me personally, this whole topic of faith in the church came back into my life a few months ago for a very particular reason. I don't come on the show telling the world that I'm the perfect devout Catholic. I'm not, right? You know, and there's lots of things to say about that, but that's not what we're here to talk about. As you know, we're facing a reality where, politically speaking, people are making their attempts to criticize China, and one of those areas is religious suppression. And I've said it point blank. I live here for 25 years. It's just simply not true. And I can start off by saying a very happy Easter and blessed Easter to everyone from here in China. And that's what got this topic started, when I had posted and shared on my social media, my Twitter account, that my family attended the traditional annual Easter vigil on Saturday evening. And by the way, little historical perspective there. Easter Sunday is Easter, but actually the celebration in the church of the resurrection of Jesus, which is what it's about, for those of you who don't know, it's about the idea that Christ was crucified and he rose from the dead. Whether you believe that or not, but this is what we're discussing. So the official beginning of that celebration is at dark on Saturday evening. So not really Sunday, Easter Sunday. The celebration of it begins within the Christian faith on Saturday night. And in the Catholic Church, there's an Easter Vigil Mass at sunset. And it always is characterized all across the world. They do typically quite beautifully, and they did here in China as well, here in Shenyang and all the other Catholic parishes all over China, where they turn the lights out in the entire church, and every single person is holding a votive candle that's lit. So it's really quite a beautiful way to start the Easter Vigil Mass, which, by the way, goes on for 2 hours, or well over 2 hours. Ours was over 2 hours and 45 minutes, and Tianla. I mean, that's a long time, of course, to be in church. And in the middle of it, you also have all the people who were learning. They decided they wanted to become Catholic, and at the Easter Vigil this Saturday evening, once a year, is when all of those people are officially baptized into the church. And that ceremony takes place like around in the middle of the Mass. So it's a long, wonderful evening. And
You told me that you had some baptisms in your church this year, right?
Yeah. So what I just mentioned was and again, this is here at the Shenyang Catholic Church during the Easter Vigil. There was 36 people who were baptized right in the middle of the Easter Vigil Mass. Now, again, the reason all of this had come up, and I'll talk more about it later, was because I was responsible for preparing our son, and again, a minor son, a minor child, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight, for his first Holy Communion, which is a wonderful thing within a Catholic family. And more about that later, right? So we come to this most interesting point to discuss today. And that's where, Jerry, you said, wow, I made a mistake regarding this very specific thing. Children who are not allowed to attend Catholic Church by official policy until they decide at 18. In China, the Catholic Church is for adults only. Okay. And that surprised you. Well, guess what? It surprised me. I hadn't heard it officially until a year ago. So we were all, myself and other people I've spoken to, we were all a bit confused about this over many years.
Because you told me that you used to go to church in Shanghai and there were a lot of youngsters there.
Yep.
And now you've met Father Michael from the German community.
Yep.
So
that's right.
What did Father Michael tell you about that?
Yeah, Father Michael. And then here, the pastor at the Shenyang Catholic Church here is a Chinese, doesn't speak any English, most wonderful man, Father Gao. What a personality, what a warm, open guy, smiling all the time, just a lovely, lovely man. And we met with him to discuss what was happening with our 12-year-old son. But it was, like you said, back in Shanghai, we had gone to Sacred Heart. Then there's also St. Pete's and another Catholic church in Shanghai. We'd gone over the years, and there was always foreign families there, of course, because there's more foreign families that are in Beijing and Shanghai. And then families were there. We were there. I never thought about it. So I never knew otherwise. Arrived here in Shenyang. I'd gone to the Mass prepared with Father Michael, who supports the German Catholic community in Shanghai and in Shenyang. Lovely man. We would go to the German Mass because, even though we don't speak German, because through the pandemic, there was no English Mass at the church, right? Only Mandarin. So, and our friends are German. So we were happy to join them for the Mass, right? So again, that was happening. And then conversation took place one day. I said to Father Michael, it's a little tough for us. I've come to understand that our son is 12. He had been baptized as a 2-year-old, as we had the christening back in America with my family. And some other Germans were planning the first communion of their children. And I knew that Father Joseph in Shanghai was also arranging English courses for some foreign children to do their first communion a few months later. And we were stuck up here in limbo in Shenyang. We weren't going to go to Shanghai to do Vincent's because we live here. So I had faced this whole dilemma. And meanwhile, I approached Father Michael and said, what are my options? What could I do? And he turned around and he said, well, first of all, children don't go to the masses. And I was like, what are you talking about? I had no idea what he was talking about.
So you didn't know this was a policy either.
Right. I had no idea it was a policy either. And he said, oh, yes. He said, that's the formal policy. Then he said, some of the churches are lax on the policy and they don't enforce it. It is, though, the official policy, and a lot of the churches do follow it. And that's when I realized the Shenyang Catholic Church here does follow it, because now I look back and I go, oh, guess what? There's only adults at all the masses, and I had never noticed that before. So that's what led to us saying, wow, this is an important thing to talk about, because we do need to talk, Jerry, about what it is and what it isn't, right?
Okay. So I'm going to tell you a little story about why I got this wrong, because I am not a churchgoer. I was, and I know that you and I are going to have a difference of opinion on this, not an argument or disagreement, but our opinions will be different on this.
Yeah.
You are bringing your son up as a Catholic. I was brought up as a Catholic in a Catholic family, a very strict Catholic family, and I've done the Easter Vigil, and I've been an altar boy. I used to swing the chalice and things like that. Not the chalice, the
Same here. We did it.
burner. Sorry,
Yeah,
if
we
anyone
did it.
swung the
Yeah.
chalice, it would be the priest. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's been a long time. And so at the age of 13, I pulled out of this, much to my mother's disgust. And I basically haven't been back to a Catholic church since then, except for to accommodate other people. Effectively, I got married in a Catholic church the first time, not to my Chinese wife, of course, but my first wedding was in the UK, and it was to she wasn't even Catholic. For some reason, she wanted to get married in this church. So we did, because I am a Catholic, and we could. She had to go through the process of education and stuff like that. My children were both baptized there, and they both went to Catholic schools. So there's that history. But at the age of 13, I pulled out of that. Now, here's the interesting thing. And I'm going to tell, we've got 109 viewers here and you. So 110 people are going to learn a little secret about my childhood that very few people know. And we're going to put it out there, and we're going to say exactly what happened. When I was 9 years old or 10 years old, in my school, we had a Catholic priest come, and he had a slideshow. Do you remember the slideshow?
Absolutely. The Kodak slides, the square, the cardboard slides.
That's right. And anybody who's under about 35 years of age will be going, what are they talking about? Anyway,
on the carousel.
Yeah. And it turned around. And I was looking at his life as a missionary in Cameroon, in West Africa. And his life was so rich. It was just an incredible life.
Yeah.
And I went home and I told my mum at the age of either 9 or 10 years old that I want to be a missionary. And my mother, being a Catholic, almost got down on her knees and said, praise the Lord. 5 sons, and one of them finally wants to be a priest. Yeah. And that was why, from the age of 11 to 13, and it was 2 full school years, but because my birthday's in the middle of the year, from 11 to 13, I was in a seminary learning normal school stuff, but very, very religious focused. And it was there that I kind of realized that I'm not really interested in being a priest. I never discovered girls at that age. I was only 13 in a boys boarding school. But that was what happened to me. Now, when I came to China, my mother has been to visit and my father has been to visit, both separately. And I took both of them to my local Catholic church. It's not the one that's behind me here. The one, it's actually prettier than this one. But my local Catholic church is just maybe 15 minutes walk from here now, but from my last apartment, 3 minutes walk. And I took both of them there. The services are in Cantonese, not Mandarin, which is interesting.
Wow.
That's another thing. Yeah, well, if you come down here again, I'll
you're
take
in the
you.
South.
You can have
it's the Hong Kong.
Yeah. Well, we're not Hong Kong. We're a long way from Hong Kong, but we are in Guangdong.
Up here, the mass is in Dongbei-hua.
Yeah. Okay. So I took, and here's what happened to me. I was in that church. This is more than 10 years ago. My father's 92 now. My mother passed away about 6 years ago, and my father is 92. So he hasn't been out here for 14 or 12 years or something like that. And when I took him to the church, it was interesting because my wife and I had recently started up a new business. We were teachers and we were teaching English, and we'd started up a language center. And I walked in there and I saw a load of the kids that I knew from the school that I used to teach in, which was not a Catholic school. It was an international school. And they were Chinese kids and some Koreans as well. We had a lot of Koreans in there. And there's a lot of these were Catholics. And, I'm waving, hello, hello. Came out of the church and the parents thought that I was the bee's knees. Here they have an English teacher who is also a Catholic, and my business took off. Because they all sent their kids privately to me to have
You were
lessons.
perfect. You were the
That was
perfect.
my
You were the
story.
perfect Lauscher.
Yeah, exactly. And that was my story as to why I thought this is rubbish. Kids are allowed. And I checked this a little while ago. I have a friend who came over from Canada. Now, he told me he was religious, and I didn't know what religion he was. He wanted to go to church. I picked him up at the ferry port, and we'd only met online. We'd never seen each other. He'd seen me, of course, on here, but we met in the ferry port, and I took him straight to the Catholic Church. And he walked in there and said, "Oh, no, this is Catholic. I don't want to be here." And I said, "Oh, sorry." The other church is just 10 minutes, less than 10 minutes walk from here. So we walked a few minutes to the other church, and he went in there. And I went home, got a cup of coffee, went back an hour later and waited outside, and a load of kids streamed out. But then I went back to the same church today, and I'll show you what I found.
Yep.
This sign. Now, I don't know how good your Chinese reading is. Mine
I
is
see it says Shabanian, 18 years.
18 years is there, yeah. Well, the 18 is clear, but it's Shabashwe, yeah. And so what we're looking at there is a message, and that is actually, after we talked today about this, I cycled home from my wife's home to my home, my wife's parents' home, that is, because my wife lives with me. I cycled home from there, and I thought, I'll just stop at the church and see what it says, if it has anything there. And I saw this sign with the number 18 years old. And I thought, I wonder if that's what that is. So I've asked
Did
my
you
wife.
WeChat translate it?
No, I could have done, but I asked my wife for a better, more accurate translation.
Oh, sure.
Her English is a lot better than WeChat's. You've met Anne. So
sure.
Anyway, the bottom line is this. It says on that sign, 18 years of age and not allowed into this building, but go around the corner to the other place, and there is a place for the children, which is a church. Now, this is the interesting aspect, because kids are not banned from the church.
No.
They're banned from the mass service, which I'm not sure exactly why. Now, I wanted to ask you a question about this, because you have a 12-year-old, and he's a really nice guy. Vincent is a really lovely kid. He's very polite. A credit to you, more of a credit to your wife, I think.
Absolutely.
But yeah, a lovely kid. And where does he go when you are at church?
Right. So the answer is he goes with us to the church.
Oh, he actually goes to church.
Wait a minute. Didn't I just tell you that that's not allowed? And I said, Father Michael said it's not officially not allowed, but if you have a lot of foreign families, for example, our where we went in Shanghai was Sacred Heart, in Pudong, and St. Pete's in another one on the Puxi side, and there were foreign families there, and there were kids there. It was many, many years ago. So I don't remember if there were Chinese children there at the same masses. But the answer is very classic to Chinese society, whether we're talking about church or not. Yes. Jerry, if you're a foreigner in China, are you treated as just another person, or are you treated as a guest?
There's a certain amount of what we call white privilege. Yes, for sure. We are treated as made welcome. And if we break laws, if we break rules without realizing it, invariably we're told, please, try not to do this again. Try not to do that. Visa regulations, for example. A friend of mine accidentally overstayed during COVID. And instead of getting into trouble about it, and he thought he was in very deep trouble, but he wasn't. What he had to do was go from the immigration department voluntarily to the police station to hand himself in. And he did that. My wife went with him as his translator. And for about 2 hours, they went through a few questions, a bit of paperwork. All that was done. 2 hours later, they were out, several cups of tea. And So then what happened with him was he had to take his, he got a letter of warning, and he had to sign to say that he'd been re-educated and wouldn't do it again. That's what they do with people, visitors, and it doesn't have to be white people. It can be black people, brown people. It doesn't matter where you come from.
Any foreigner.
Yeah, and anyone who is a visitor can literally get away with breaking minor rules, and so yeah, you'll get that. And it occurs to me now that many of the kids, because just when my friend came over here, it was just before the winter, so it was probably about October. James Stew, and James might be watching. He often does. He lives in Canada. He and I went to the church, and I saw lots of kids. But
Mm.
now I don't know if those kids were Korean or Chinese. And it's
Yes,
making me think maybe the
yes,
Koreans were in there and the
yes,
Chinese weren't, or maybe even Japanese too. Because I live in a city that has a lot of Asians who are not from China.
yes.
There's actually a lot of Taiwanese too, and they are from China, but that's another story. So that's what happened to me.
That's right. That's right.
Mm.
And on my end, again, we're dealing with something that, in this particular instance, is you have the official policy, but then you have lax and casual and understanding enforcement of it.
Yeah.
So if a foreigner shows up with their child at in this particular case, we're talking about the Shenyang Catholic Church, but I'm certain it's the same across the country. That if a foreigner with their child shows up at the church to go to mass, they're just literally going to be welcomed with a smile on the faces of the people welcoming them. And that's what I experienced. So no one ever says, oh, no, excuse me, we have a rule. You're not allowed to bring your child. Why? Because if a foreigner shows up at your church, their attitude is, wow, we're so happy you showed up at our church. You're a special guest. Welcome to join our community to come to this mass. So they overlook the rule and they allow you to enter with your children. And that's the answer. Now, to me, this is terrific. There's certainly no oppression going on, that's for sure.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I'm just scrolling through the questions here because I saw someone make a point. It was this one a long time ago. As a person born and raised in a majority Catholic country, I think it's a great idea that minors cannot be, I love the word drafted. They can do it when they're adults, and I support that. So I was going to ask you, my next question, you just said it's not about oppression. What is it about? And I think Kuro has found the answer there, right?
Yeah. People who want to criticize and hate on China will make their attempts to label anything that China doesn't allow as some kind of oppressive rule. It has absolutely nothing to do with oppression whatsoever. The question of whether or not children should be in the formal dogma and indoctrination of the religion is a centuries-old question that has been argued in countries, all and amongst parents and clergy in countries all over the world. It's not in any way an exclusive question that has to do with China. It has nothing to do with oppression whatsoever. It even is a question that is argued within the Christian faith as part of the schism, going back to Martin Luther, when the schism occurred, where and I experienced this as an adult going back 20, 25 years. I haven't always been an active Catholic, and in previous years, going back to America, now we're going back 30 years because I've been here in China 25 years, I'd also met and befriended other lovely Christian friends of other denominations, Baptist, Pentecostal, Evangelical, Southern Baptist, whatever they might have been, I can't remember. There's so many denominations. And I even remember that even the other denominations would say, we disagree with and we do not practice the same rules and doctrine as the Catholic Church. We don't believe in infant baptism. We think a person should be an adult of sentient mind to make their decision to say, I am an adult. I am aware. I'm educated. I want to follow Christ. I want to be baptized into the church. And they make that decision as an adult. That's a conversation that I heard 100 times back in the United States when I was an adult growing up, living my life there. That's what it's about, Jerry. And people there's only three possibilities of your opinion on this. Either you absolutely agree that children should receive the instruction early on along the way, even though they don't understand it, or you completely disagree, like a lot of the denominations do, that no, there should not be any baptism, infant baptism, and no, the children should not just be told to do what they're supposed to do if they don't understand it. Or you're like me. And me, I'm 50-50. I'm right in the middle. I see both sides of it, and I'll explain why. But I'll stop here for the moment.
Okay. Now, I was just thinking about that you mentioned other religions. The Baptists are that's why they're called Baptists, because they wait until they're adults to do that.
Thank you. Thank you. So the Chinese government agrees with the Baptists. This is what we're saying. That's all.
Agree with the Chinese government. Can you imagine going online and chatting with an American Baptist and saying, well, you and the CCP, as they like to call it, you and the CCP have a lot in common, you know. No, I don't. Well, actually, yes, you do. So it's starting to make sense to me. As a kid, I was indoctrinated. I was brought up in the Catholic faith. I learned my catechisms and stuff like that at school. Then at 13 years of age, I rebelled. Now imagine, because I'm quite a curious person. I'm inquisitive. I always want to know what's going on. Now imagine if my parents had not been allowed to take me to church and they put me somewhere else while they went to church, like a Sunday school or something like that. I never had a Sunday school because I was always in church with my parents. And we got all of the education we needed. I went to Catholic schools for much of my education. So it's starting to make sense. If I was a kid and if you were my parents and you put me in this other place, until I was about 15 or 16, I'd probably be saying, why am I here? I want to be with you there. And it would make me more want to be a Catholic than the situation that I had. So it's not even about the 50-50 thing. It's if you think about and I saw a comment on television just today that I think it was Richard Dawkins was being interviewed. Church attendance is, I know, I didn't think you'd like that, but church, he said he considers himself a Christian culture rather than anything else. He doesn't believe a word of Christianity, but he says, I'm a Christian culture. It was a really interesting interview because it actually made sense to me too. I would hate to see England without cathedrals and churches.
Yes, culture and tradition. That's right. Culture and tradition has meaning. Regardless of faith, cultures and traditions and history has meaning and gives people a sense of community.
So what would happen if you sent me to a Sunday school until I was 18 years of age, instead of allowing me to go to church? I would be at the age of 18. I want to see what's going on in here. And I would probably become a Catholic.
Yep. I understand. So more other options on this. So other things that are happening on this. I know that now in the American Catholic churches, that now that you go to Mass with your family, this is what they do. I believe they were doing this at St. Patrick's, where my mom goes in Phoenix. And I must take a moment to stop and say, especially with respect to the fact that we just had our son's first communion here in China, that's an amazing piece of information for me to share with Father Eric, the pastor at St. Patrick's. He doesn't know yet. And also Deacon Jim, who helped arrange it. God bless both of them, and my thanks to them, because they provided me with the English education material to prepare my boy over these last few months that I was responsible to do as a parent. And they don't even know yet that he got his first Holy Communion just 2 days ago. So I owe a debt of thanks to them. So what I know at the Catholic churches in America, the families go in, and let's say you're talking about families with 2 to 9-year-olds. I'm just picking up an age range here, okay?
Yep.
Mass begins. How does Mass begin? The priest welcomes everyone, and immediately everyone says, let us begin Mass by calling to mind our sins. That's the very, and so come to God with humility.
Yep.
And that is literally the first 90, those two things happen in the first 90 seconds of the Mass. And then the priest says, and now all the children in the Mass, as you all know, Mrs. Jones is waiting for you in the back and all the kids leave. Right. And Mrs. Jones in the back takes them to a separate room in another building, wherever it might be, and then does some appropriate things for 2 to 9-year-olds that are along the lines of church teachings, but more oriented to what's appropriate for kids. Because I didn't have that. When I went to school, they didn't. When I went to church, when I was growing up in the 1970s, St. John the Baptist Church and School, God bless them all, okay, I was a kid and I was in the Mass the whole time. And guess what I was doing? Staring at the ceiling, waiting for it to be over.
Looking at the artwork.
Looking at the artwork, looking at the stained glass, and bored out of my mind. So did I know and understand what was happening? No. And that's the 50-50 argument. So I'm going to say it clearly. I personally experienced this. I wasn't even a spiritual person in any way, let alone Catholic, for many, many years of my life. Okay, fine. I was baptized as an infant. I certainly don't remember that. I received my first communion, and I can still see the pictures of it from when I was in 3rd grade, when I received my first communion along with everyone else. And the boys were wearing gray little suits and the girls were wearing white little dresses. And I remember it all. I can picture it all and remember it all. But I have absolutely no sense of what it was other than, we're doing what? Okay, we're doing what the parents and the church and the nuns told us we were doing. As far as I was concerned, it was okay. It was like a math test. It didn't mean anything. I was in 3rd grade. I had no sense of my spiritual journey. And the same is true for my 5th and 6th grade confirmation and confession and all of that. I look back on it and go, what? I had no clue. Now, did they verbally say, confirmation, Mario, means that you accept the living Holy Spirit living in you and every person? Did they teach me that? Yes. But I was an 11-year-old kid. It went in one ear and out. It went in one ear and out the other. You're telling me to love Jesus and Jesus loves me, and you're going to get your confirmation and receive the Holy Spirit. And I go, answer A, do you understand? 1, yes. B, do you understand? C, do you understand? Oh, you passed the test, and now you're going to have your confirmation. It was ridiculous. It was ridiculous.
Stuff like that too.
I'm being honest to the audience, So that's the negative side. That's where I say, I do understand. I know I just said is against Catholic doctrine because they still do it, but I am in disagreement with it for these reasons. I'll stop there because there's more to say about this.
I'm just putting this one up, and this is what the argument that I had with my mother when I was 13. I'm quite a logical person, as people who follow me probably know. You don't have to go to church to be a Christian. And my mum said, yes, you do. And I said, well, hang on a second. I thought God was everywhere. And of course, we had this argument. Don't be so flippant. Don't be so smart. I'm 13 years old. I got a lot of around the ears when this was happening. You don't have to be a Christian to go to church. You don't have to go to church to be a Christian. It's as simple as that. With me, what I felt was at that time, I actually believed in God. I don't anymore, but I did at that time. And I just felt that the whole thing was hypocritical. Going to a building and standing up, sitting down, repeating taught phrases, learned phrases by memory. I was an altar boy and a choir boy too. So that was the reason why I'm with Persimmon here. You don't have to go to church to be a Christian. You don't have to go to church or mosque to be an Islamist. You don't have to go to the synagogue to be a Jew. you are what you are, and if you have a God, surely that God is omnipotent and he can see what's going on. If God is a he. Yeah.
What I'd like to do is I'm going to take less than a minute and present the other side of that. Let me present the other side of that argument with you. And this is the Catholic Doctrine's argument. And then let's move on to the next points, because we're back to China and what it means for Chinese families. Ask me that next. But let me explain this to you first. To what you said, which is what a lot of the other denominations say, and at other times in my past, over the years, I also felt the same way, is, well, once I've decided, look, this is my faith, this is what I believe, I could go to Bible studies and this and that, but, I already know that this is what is my faith and what I believe, and I pray, and so I don't need to go to church, this formal thing. The Catholic Doctrine's answer to that is to understand, and again, I just want to create both sides of understanding for the audience. According to the Catholic doctrine, they say, once you do accept Jesus and the idea that Jesus said Pentecost, which is that the living Holy Spirit of God is living inside of you and inside of every person, so that when I, as a person, love my wife and my son, it's not me loving her and him, it's the living God, the living Spirit of God in me that is one with and loves the living Spirit of God in my wife and my son. And that's why it's unbreakable, etc. And this is where the schism occurred, primarily because of the sacraments. The Catholic doctrine is that once you have said, I'm Catholic, I'm Christian, I have a relationship with Christ and the Holy Spirit, I'm done on that. I've made up my mind. You say that's where it ends. I can go, I don't have to go to church anymore. I've already made up my mind. This is my faith and I can go now. I don't have to go to church. The Catholic Church, the doctrine says, now you have the sacraments, and it is through the sacraments that you live your relationship with Jesus. So that's an explanation of their view that says, no, you do need to go to church. You do need to experience the sacraments, and that's their reasoning behind it. We can go on to the next thing.
Yeah, just as one of my mum's arguments, how are you going to receive the body of Christ if you don't go to church?
Yeah,
I thought he was already inside me. Bang.
Yes. I know. I fully understand. And this is the argument. There's two sides, right? Yeah. I do need to do this. No, you don't. And this has been, this is not our conversation or a China conversation. This has been the conversation for millennia, thousands of years.
Okay, next question. You said your wife is converted to Catholicism.
No, and thanks for bringing that up. My wife is perfectly happy to become a Catholic. She's perfectly happy to follow along. Her heart and her mind are open. She's very happy about everything we're doing, but she hasn't yet. And in fact, in the Chinese, we inquired about that, and it's quite a demanding requirement. In order for you as an adult in China to get baptized at our church anyway, the Shenyang Catholic Church, we went to see about, you got to take some classes. It's the same back in America. I don't know how long it is back in America. I didn't check, but in China, it's every Sunday morning for 10 months.
Do you get homework?
Probably. So it's a long and a big demand on a person in the Chinese Catholic Church to become Catholic. No, my wife's not going to do it, to be frank, and that's okay. It's the fact that she's putting in 60 hours a week in her career, and so no, at this time she's not going to commit that time to become a Catholic. And within our family, that's okay. But the point for us to talk about is that this is the requirement. So it's 10 months, every Sunday, an hour and a half meeting with the other people and with the priest to go through the catechism, which means the education to become a Catholic. So that's really something, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Let me ask you a more personal question here then.
Mm. Sure.
How does Vincent's 12, right? Or
Yeah.
13, 12. Okay. How does Vincent view, you're a Catholic and you say this is right, but mum is not a Catholic? How does
Yeah.
Vincent view that? Because he's a 12-year-old boy. That must be a little kind of confusing. If this is the right thing to do, why doesn't
Yeah.
mum do it?
Yes. Again, we can now have this discussion with Vincent because he's hit the point where I now call him a young man. I mean, he has a brain, he has a mind, he can understand things. And
I've
so
met
the
him.
answer to your question
Yeah.
is he understands that mom is not going to spend every Sunday morning for the next 10 months going to catechism. She's just not going to do that. And he understands that. He was baptized as a 2-year-old. So it's like,
Right.
oh, wow. And he even said, oh, wow, Dad, so you guys got me baptized as a 2-year-old. That's good because I didn't have to go to 10 months of classes. He's got it figured out, right? So there's your answer, is that he understands. And
Yeah.
I present everything to him in a empathetic and compassionate way of explaining and saying there's nothing perfect. And Lord knows there's plenty of scandals and problems and conflicts regarding the church. We know that even to this day. So I've never said to him, Vincent, this is perfect. It's not perfect, but I, as a parent, realized that I had a very specific choice to make regarding my son and also regarding my wife, because I regard myself traditionally as the man and the leader of the family, the man who is devoted to what is the best for the well-being of my wife that I'm devoted to and my son that I'm devoted to. And this went for me back not necessarily to theology, but philosophy. If you go back to the original teachers of the church, literally the doctors of the church, I'm referring to St. Thomas of Aquinas and Augustine, it's not that they were holy guys. They were much more than that. These were amongst the greatest philosophers in the history of mankind, even if you're not a religious person. So, and on that basis, I went back to the classic question of philosophy and theology, which is, do I want my son, and of course, therefore my wife, us as a family, to live by mind and reason or faith and heart? That is the eternal philosophical question, to live by faith or to live by reason. And that is the arguments of Kant and Spinoza, and I mean, just all of them. That's the eternal argument, and that's what it's all about. And so I decided as a parent that this was the way to go. And this is what made me say, okay, now is the time for me to bring this up to my son and take him to the step of his first communion. I'm extremely glad I did it. But reflecting my own 45 years of journey, my spiritual journey of ups and downs, now he's going to have his. I'm not ramming it down his throat, but I'm very proud of him to try at his own age to come to this understanding of the difference between living by faith, living by reason, living by what's right, living by what's wrong. I'm very proud of his effort to try and do that. And it's because I'm responsible for my son's education about the world and about philosophy and theology and religion. And that's my responsibility as a parent to do, which leads to the next point, if I may.
You may.
Let's think about this for a second. What does China's policies mean? The Baptists too, right? So we have the Chinese government and the Baptists have the same policy. Wow, you're kidding me. Now let's think about this for a second, because it speaks to the problem of the deterioration of the society in the West, in the United States. This policy also means what in the daily life of parents and their families? In China, the parents have 100% freedom in their homes and the responsibility that goes along with that freedom. The responsibility falls on those parents who go to the church when they're home to educate and instruct their children and prepare their children for the future. We sit down for dinner. It's not just dinner, Jerry. It's time to talk as a family. I say, Vincent, I'm here on this earth to prepare. You are a 12-year-old boy. You're a fine young man, but there's a lot you need to learn. And I have to spend my next 6 years doing my best to teach you about life and prepare you to go out there into the world. And by the time I am done doing that, by the way, I may also die, like naturally be dead and gone. And I'm gone, my lovely young boy. So this is what I have to do as a parent. Now, compare that to what's going on in the United States, right? You know, the single family homes, the dropping of religion, the dropping of marriage as the core of society, all this stuff, the woke culture. It's a disaster for young people, and it is an emotional disaster for young people. And I'll go so far as to say that it's a spiritual disaster for young people as well. Because now, here in China, I, as a parent, I partner with educational and religious institutions to educate and prepare my son for life in this crazy, unpredictable planet that we live in. You know,
you asked me to come back to a question. Chinese families, what does it mean to them?
Yeah. It's what I just said, okay? It means to the Chinese family that the parent, this puts the responsibility of the parents at home to be responsible to bring up their children and to educate them and prepare them, since the church, with the church, in, like you said, Sunday school. It's what you said, Jerry. You want to go to Mass when you're 18? Huh. That's interesting, because you weren't allowed to go all these years, right? Yeah. And now you want to go. So this puts the responsibility, and this is on the parents. This is exactly, notice, Jerry, how this is 100% in line with the Chinese government's policy, that and the way that they govern this society, which is in the traditional way, very much in line with Italy. That what? Family households are the foundation of society. Marriage and family are the foundation of society. As the society has begun to become more chaotic with modernization, there's increasing divorce rates, and the laws of China, the Beijing just came out with laws to strengthen marriage and to add a 30-day waiting period before you divorce. This government is doing it right and proper, that marriage and family households are the root and core of society. Damn it, you better stay together, and you, mom and dad, it's your responsibility to put the education of your children proper and do it right. And so, Dad, if you're not home, get your butt home and be devoted to your family and prepare your children. So this is really in line. The church policy is actually in line with putting the responsibility on parents to stay together and be a good model and bring up good, wholesome, strong two-parent families. Boy, do I sound like a boomer. Yeah.
It doesn't look unpredictable in China. But the interesting thing about what you just said there, it's the parents' responsibility to look after the children.
Yep.
What then happens when the parents retire? It's the children's responsibility to look after the parents in this country.
Which is why we moved to Shenyang in the first place. Exactly. That's why we're here, as you know.
To be near your wife's mother, yeah.
To take care of my wife's mother, as in her old age. That's right.
Let's move on from our personal stuff to another issue that people who are interested in freedom of religion in China, when I say people are interested, generally speaking, the people that contact me are not interested in it. They just say, you don't have it. And I say, well, sure. Actually, we do. I'm a Jesuit and we're not allowed into China. Well, maybe you're not. I'm a Seventh-day Adventurist, I used to call them, Seventh-day Adventist.
Yeah.
The other one was that somebody came into me. I'm a Jehovah's Witness, and I got expelled from China.
Yeah, because
you probably did because
you're knocking on doors.
knocking on doors. And Steve Weaver is in the audience tonight. Steve is a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, a Mormon, Latter-day Saints, sorry, a Mormon,
Hey,
and
Steve.
a lovely guy. I've met
Yep.
Steve. Steve says, really interesting discussion, Jerry and Maro. So thank you, Steve. Now, what happened with missionaries? There are no missionaries in. I'm going to tell you a little story. I went out for a beer with a friend of mine last Wednesday, just a couple of days ago, a few days ago, Wednesday or Friday. I can't remember what day it is now anyway, but usually we meet on Wednesdays or Fridays. But anyway, I went out and I met up with this friend of mine, and he's a teacher in a kindergarten, and it was a few days before Easter, and he said, "You won't believe what happened to me." Now, this is a guy who's lived in China for 23, longer than me, 23 years. He said, "You won't believe what happened to me, and I'm going to destroy your credibility about religious freedoms." And I said, "Oh, what happened?" He said, "The police came to our school today." I said, "Really?" "Yes, they told me that there will be no teaching about Easter. Where is your religious freedom now?" And I said, "Exactly what the law says. There's no religious education. How would you feel if they came in and said, you can't teach Ramadan in school?" He said, "Well, I don't want to teach Ramadan." No, not the point. Not the point. So we had a discussion. In the end, he came around to me, and there was another guy listening, said, "Jerry's got a point, you know. No religion in school whatsoever. It's not allowed in any school anywhere inside of China. It's not allowed. It is allowed in Hong Kong. It is allowed in Taiwan. It is allowed in Macau, but it's not allowed on the mainland because Hong Kong and Macau have different rules, special administrative regions, and Taiwan is managed by a different group of people. So they have differences." What's that, a high five?
No,
We have something to add.
because it was infiltrated by the CIA.
Well, that's another thing, actually. This is actually coming out right now in the trials of Jimmy Lai and the Cardinal Zen, who I call
Incredible.
Cardinal Sin, because the
Incredible.
translation of his name is Sin. So Cardinal Sin was actually convicted. No, he's been charged with. I'm not sure he's been convicted yet, but he was money laundering for the American government to orchestrate protesters. Now, what kind of religious leader does that?
What kind of religious leader does that? A corrupt criminal guy who happens to be a religious leader.
So this is one of the problems that China has. It says you have total freedom to choose whatever religion, but we're not going to let you preach your religion to anyone. Now, I was going to ask if you knew anything about the Taiping rebellion.
Yeah, no, but you had brought this up, and I appreciate it because we mentioned earlier another Christian gentleman, another expat in Chongqing, Patrick. He's the one who brought this. He's the one who brought this up to me. He sent me the link, and I'm going to read this. You're not even going to believe the link. What I'm about to read to you. I got my screens in front of me here. A 1996 article in the Washington Post. Now, that's 1996. We're not talking like 2021. We're talking 29 years ago. Okay. And the title of this article in the Washington Post is CIA Can Waive Prohibition Against Using U.S. Clergy Abroad for Covert Work. I mean, this is just absolutely it's abominable is what it is. It's abominable. And same thing with the New York Times article, February 1976, same thing. The article subject is the CIA enlisting overseas foreign press and church missionaries as a way of spying against other countries and doing all kinds of covert operation work. So you think China wouldn't shut this stuff down? Of course. So what did we say? They don't allow public activity. Do they allow the most important core thing, which is Christianity within families to be taught and prosper and blossom and be practiced as adults. Is any of that stopped? Not, or oppressed in any way? Not at all.
No. And these home churches that everyone says, oh, they pulled houses down because they were home churches. No, they pulled houses down because they were illegal structures, perhaps. But they have. Go on.
And because because I know how people are in China, you create these little private groups, and then they end up becoming money laundering ways of people making money off the books. And it's a Bible study. No. And it's money. It's about money, and that's why the government shuts it down.
Yeah. So if you want to go to church, you go to church. If you want to have a religious meeting, you do it in church, through the church.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's not oppression.
Notwithstanding that, I actually know some Christians in China. I don't know them now. They've left China, but I knew Christians in China who had a home church and didn't want to go through, and they were genuine Christians. They were people that I respected. In fact, one of them was a very, very close friend of mine, and we worked very closely together. And I would say they were doing it for the right reasons. But if they got caught, they would have been expelled, and they all knew that. But they were inviting Chinese people into their group, and I thought that was quite a dangerous thing to do. That lady that I became very, very close to, we worked very closely together. She employed me at one stage with a view to me replacing her when she left the company she was with. I was her protege, but she was a very, very deeply religious person, a very nice person. So it's not all nasty stuff like CIA. But then you start thinking about things like this, what are they called? The Peace Corps. Who trains and who funds, and what are the Peace Corps? These Peace Corps volunteers, they are here for a very different reason to teaching English and sharing culture. And I think that's the kind of thing. In China, they had to change their name from the Peace Corps to the Friendship Corps. And a lot of people came through China and have stayed in China a long time as a result of coming here through that. But I was going to talk about the Taiping Rebellion.
Yes, that's another aspect. And I don't know about this. Now I'm listening to you. How does it tie into that? Tell me. That's amazing history, the Taiping Rebellion, the Boxer Rebellion.
Well, the Boxer Rebellion and the Taiping Rebellion are very, very different, but they both had roots in missionaries very differently. But let's go to the Taiping first. The Taiping Rebellion was a guy called Hong Xiuquan. And he was a failed candidate 4 times, I think, 4 times for when you came from an impoverished area, and he came from an area to the north of Guangdong, which is part of Huadu now, near the airport. There wasn't an airport back then. It was 170 years ago. And because he was from a farming family, you have one hope of getting out of that kind of serfdom, almost subsistence living, and that is if somebody takes the civil service exam, what we call the civil service exam. And he took it 4 times, and he was a model student, but he failed it each time. And of course, he lost the respect of his family. He had fell out with his mother over this. And a guy, I just wrote his name down. I'd never heard of this guy until recently. Edwin Stevens was his name, who was a student of Yale. Now, I'm not going to say there's a connection between Yale and the CIA, but there's a connection between Yale and the CIA. But there wasn't a CIA back in those days. But the State Department all come out of Yale. So there we go. And this guy indoctrinated him into the work of Jesus. And he then, because he was a disillusioned, disgruntled, disaffected young man, and he was a young man, he then decided that he was the Son of God. He was the younger brother of Jesus Christ, and he built an army to remove the Qing dynasty so that China could become a Christian kingdom under his rule. That is what started the Taiping Rebellion.
Wow.
So that started with an American missionary called Edwin Stevens. And there's another one. This is also an American, but a very interesting name. And I had to write this one down. Issachar Jaycox Roberts, another missionary who actually went to Nanning, where the Taiping rebels were based, and became their spiritual advisor. So he was there for a while until one of his staff got murdered, and he accused the leaders of the rebellion of murdering his staff, and he basically got kicked out. He didn't get murdered. He left. Edwin Stevens died of leprosy, and Issachar Roberts died of diseases whilst traveling home. He got stuck in Singapore, and he was only 36. I think Stevens was 36 years old, and Roberts was in his 70s, or the other way around. I can't remember which. But those two people, who were both American Christian missionaries, created the Taiping Rebellion. Now, the Taiping Rebellion was just inside of China, and the number of people who died in the Taiping Rebellion is believed to be more than the number of people who died in World War I. Something around 30 million people died because of Jesus in China.
Oh,
that's why they don't like missionaries. That's why they stop missionaries. Now, we can move on from that to the Boxer Rebellion, if you like, the hand of the righteous fist. They were nicknamed Boxers because they were these guys who did the martial arts training, hours and hours of martial arts training, just punching things. So they got the nickname Boxers. And they were actually pro the Qing dynasty. They were not anti the Qing dynasty, but they were anti-imperialism. They wanted to remove imperialists from China, because what was happening, this was much later, and it wasn't until 1901 that this was all over. The Boxer Rebellion was much more recent. My grandparents were alive when the Boxer Rebellion finished. And again, nobody knows how many millions died, but a lot. And what happened there was they realized that places like Qingdao, Wuhan, Chongqing to a lesser extent, but several places along the river, Shanghai was one, Guangzhou was another. These places had been taken over by foreigners, imperialists, and they wanted them back under Chinese control. That was why the Boxer Rebellion started. So again, it was aimed specifically at the religious leaders, because religious people by the Qing dynasty at the time were given the power to purchase land and build churches, and that was farming land, rural China.
Do you have a date for me? Do you have a date for me? I've been referencing online as you've been speaking. So I saw Taiping Rebellion was mid 1800s. Do you have a date for me on Boxer Rebellion?
Much later. It was after the Opium Wars.
Oh, right. Okay, good. Into early 19. And the reason that I'm asking you this is because I'm referencing it to the end of the Qing dynasty, which was, of course, the early 1900s, and the last emperor of China, who was the last emperor of the Qing dynasty, Puyi. In fact, 2 weeks ago, we just went to Changchun and went to Puyi's palace. This is my mother's favorite historical story about China. And Puyi was first made emperor at the age of 2.
Yeah, I thought he was
first
3.
time, because he was made emperor and abdicated and then made emperor again later. But at the age of 2, he was first made the emperor in 1908. Then he abdicated after during and because of the Xinhai Revolution. Then, though, as an adult later, he was again made emperor. But the reason I brought all this up was because Puyi's life goal, and he didn't succeed, he wanted to restore. He really did. He tried to build up. He tried to arrange. He tried to find an army. He tried to get. He knew the Japanese were very capable and tried to have the Japanese help him, because his goal, his intent, was to try and restore the Qing dynasty, and he never succeeded. And he never succeeded at that. He never did. He didn't succeed.
That's why the Boxer Rebellion helped him, and the Dowager. There was a Dowager as well, an empress there. This is also true of the people who stole the secrets of tea silk. I'm not sure about porcelain, but definitely tea and silk were Jesuit priests, and one of the two that I just mentioned actually wrote a book about it, how he went to Wuyi Shan was one of the great places for tea, and he got the seeds to take to India. So there's a lot to be said for a bad history with missionaries here in China. A
Yep.
lot to be said.
Absolutely.
We can kind of put that down to historical problems. Now, yeah, the Boxer Rebellion would have been around the end of the Qing dynasty, and it was very much in support of the Qing dynasty and very much against the missionaries who were taking over land that was people's land, farming land, to build churches. So now, I think I've reached the end. I've got some questions here, but I've reached the end. We've pretty much covered everything.
Well, we covered the point we wanted to cover, which is that religion is very free and the policies are, you could disagree on the policies, but you could disagree with the Baptists as quickly as you could disagree with the Chinese government on what those policies are, and but what we do know, as we started this live stream, which was the fact that we went and experienced and enjoyed all across China a happy and blessed Easter celebration of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, which is the greatest celebration of Catholics and Christians. And we celebrated it here in China, all across the country, exactly the same way that it is celebrated across the rest of the entire world by however many billions of Catholics and Christians that there are. And that is the reality, not that there is any oppression or lack of freedom of religion in China. And this was one of the big messages that you and I wanted to get across. Yet we needed to make this clarification about how they handle children.
The other thing that we needed to do was for me to correct my error, which I have done. I've corrected the error. It happened. I made a mistake based on my experience, the same experience that you have as well.
Yeah.
A couple of points coming in. There's a lot of stuff coming in here. And Steve Weaver has this interesting book, which refers to the Boxer Rebellion as the Chinese Relief Expedition, which is exactly how it was seen in the US. And the 8 Nations Alliance, the sacking of the Summer Palace, all of those things, all related to this. They were in punishment. And the other thing was 45 taels of silver, 450 had to be paid in not reimbursement, what's the word? Punishment fees. There's a word for that, but had to be paid. And that was equivalent to a 12-month collection of the entire country's tax. The amount of restitution that had to be paid to the 8 Nations Alliance. So you can see why they don't want this to happen again. Now, I want to just cover this little point here. Nibiru. This is actually not true. This is not true. I've been to Jiangye, which is Marco Polo's hometown in China, the place where he was supposed to spend.
I want to go. I want to go there. I didn't go yet.
I've been there twice, actually. I've cycled through it twice.
Where is it? Where is it again?
It's in Gansu. It's not far from Jiayuguan. It's a really, really wonderful city. It absolutely is a wonderful city. And so is Jiayuguan and Zhouchuan. And I love that part of China. The volcano in Pompeii, what do you call that word? Made people into rocks. What's that called? Petrified.
Ossified, mummified. Yeah.
Petrified. Literally petrified. So the word petrified, I'm terrified, comes from this turned into a rock. And what they found when they're going through this is there was pasta in various different forms in Pompeii a long time before Marco Polo ever came to China. And it's just Chinese people love the myth. They love the myth, but that's just one of those things that does need correcting from time to time. The compass is from China. Gunpowder is from China. Interesting thing about gunpowder, everybody, if you're watching, what did China do with gunpowder? They used it for festivities. They used it for fireworks, which are literally called sky flowers in their language. They used it for everything that was positive, and it was only years later the West used it for making guns. There you go. That tells you something. I made a video a long time ago about that. The Qing dynasty were Manchu. They were not Han. That is correct. And the guy who started the Boxer Rebellion, Hong, was a Hakka, which is a substack of Han. Basically a group of people who had moved from the north over a long period of time. So he was Hakka and Han. Yeah. So sky flowers, yes, Anne, it is sky flowers. Anne, darling. Now that's interesting because my wife is Anne, and I sometimes call her darling. So somebody with the same name as my wife in the questions there. Anne, darling, can we? So sorry, Anne. The country that invented the stone mill invented noodles. Well, that makes a lot of sense. And China's been doing what they do in Africa. They have these bowls where they've got the round one, the dojang, lots of different things. Okay, so we've gone to an hour and 10 minutes. I think we fixed the problem that I had. We've answered a lot of questions. We've covered lots of things. There's been some great chats. I'm trying to keep my eye on the chats while we've been talking.
Same here. I've been looking over there. Some good stuff.
Some great chats going on. But I think we're coming to the end of it. It's now, what are we, 9:15 now in Chinatown. And we got over 200 viewers. That's fantastic.
Fantastic. So, thank you, Jerry. Thank you so much for having an important discussion, to clearly, what's your goal? What's my goal? For people to truly and clearly and rationally and reasonably understand what's really going on in China. And I will end my words by saying China is now the largest, safe, stable, successful, capable, civil, and peaceful country on the planet. That's my phrase. And it's all true. And even better, they've become the new global superpower of the world. They are the third. First it was Europe, then the United States, to become the global superpower of the world. And they are the first in history to have risen up to global superpower. They did it in these 40 years, 100% in peace, without war, without attacking, bombing, killing the civilians of any other nation. That's a miracle for all of us to remember. I love this about China, and this is the future. This is the way forward. And unfortunately, America doesn't get it yet, and Zionist Israel doesn't get it yet. But we can only hope and pray that they will realize soon that this is the future, a future of mutual cooperation and peace, led by China.
Very well said. I can't add anything to that. On that happy note, let's call it a night and say thank you, everyone, for joining us, especially all the old friends who were there. And thank you, Mario, for correcting me today, because despite my sometimes arrogance, I love to be told if I'm wrong. I hate to be wrong and not get told. So thank you very much. Okay, let's call it a night and say good night to everyone else. And,
good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
End the stream. So thank you very much, everyone who